Make our declaration. Hafokba, hafokba da kolaba, hafokba, hafokba mashiachba. Turn it and turn it, for everything is in it. Turn it and turn it, for the Messiah is in it. He is, and for every good and acceptable sacrifice, there is a divine response. And so, as we go through this week, we look at the Parashat, and Kim talked about it Wednesday night, about the Parashat, about Korach's rebellion. And she said something that cut me to the heart. She said, what about when we say things against our elected leaders that we shouldn't be saying? It's like, yeah, I've said some things that I shouldn't have said, and I have repented of that. But a question, is it okay to question leadership? Absolutely. Absolutely. It is okay to question leadership. But is it okay to slander leadership? That's a different matter altogether. And so I want to start by looking at 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 23. Oh, yeah, can you go back to that? Yeah, I found this picture and I thought, yeah, I'm going to use that. So that's Korach approaching Moshe. So, yeah, the question is, whose kingdom is it? All right, 1 Samuel. Rebellion is like the sin of sorcery, and defiance like the iniquity of idolatry. That's very, very serious. And so just to kind of give a little bit of background about where we are. So we know that rebellion really rises up. And has rebellion raised its ugly head in Israel before this point? Yeah. Yeah, there's been screaming and hollering and crying, all this kind of stuff. The spies have been sent in. Now they come back with a negative report. Well, that's rebellion against God. And the people believed them. That also is rebellion against God. And they were saying, God hates us. God hates us. That's why he brought us out of Egypt, brought us out here to kill us in the wilderness. So why don't we do this? Let's appoint a new leader and let's go back to the land of Egypt. Because after all, we had melons there and garlic and leeks. We had food. Okay, I just kind of forgot about everything else. And so when they were busy complaining, the glory of God showed up. Now, we read about the glory of God showing up, and that's exciting. We get excited about it. Sometimes the glory of God shows up, and it's not too exciting. Because in this case, the glory of God showed up, and I could just picture him going, oh no, what a mistake to make. So God told him, he said, all right, I've heard what has come out of your mouth, and I'm going to give you what has come out of your mouth. Those of you who are 20 and older, those of you who came out of the land of Egypt and you're 20 and older and you saw everything I did, you don't get to go in. You want to despise the land? That's fine. I'll let you despise it. And you're going to wander around in this wilderness for 40 years until your carcasses drop dead. Those 19 and under, they're going to be the ones who are going to get to go in, and they're going to be the ones who are going to get to enjoy the land. So that was a rebellion, and God said, you don't get to go in, but something really, I'm going to use the word spectacular, but it seems like it's wrong to use here, but it really is. It was spectacular, but in a very bad way. Something happened in this week's Parashat. And so, yeah, and so all of this had happened, and now they're told you can't go in, and human nature just rises up, and they say, well, we got to have somebody to blame for all this. We're not going to take the blame. We're going to take the punishment, but we ain't taking the blame for it. And who is the obvious person chosen to take the blame from everybody? Well, it's going to be Moshe. It's going to be Moses, of course. And so I want to start by looking at Numbers chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. And Korach was the one who said, y'all stand back. I'm going to handle this. I got him under my thumb. Now, Korach, the son of Yetzar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levy, along with Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab and On, the son of Pelet, descendants of Reuben. took men and rebelled against Moshe. Why in the world is he going through the trouble of giving all this genealogy to these guys? Well, we'll find out a little bit later. Siding with them were 250 men of Israel, leaders of the community, key members of the council, men of reputation. They assembled themselves against Moshe and Aharon and said to them, "You take too much on yourselves. After all, the entire community is holy, every one of them, and Adonai is among them. So why do you lift yourselves up above Adonai's assembly?" All right, so I have a question here. Did Korach tell the truth in his facts? Was the entire assembly holy? Yeah. Was God in their midst? Yeah. So he told the truth. That is in facts. But the problem got to be when he decided, I'm going to throw my own opinion in there and see what happens. And it didn't go too well for him. And so his accusation caused 253 other men to join in his rebellion. And they said, Moses and Aaron, you guys were not appointed to this. You took this upon yourselves. That's what he said, Rav Lecha. Great for you. In other words, he's basically what he's saying is, God didn't appoint you to this. You did this on your own. I don't know about y'all, but if I saw Moses strike the Nile River with a stick and it turned to blood, and if I saw Moses take dirt, throw it up in the air and it becomes lice, and if I saw Moses call darkness upon the land and all these other things, I don't think I'd be messing with him. If they thought it was Moses who did all of this, they said, you were not called to this. God didn't call you to this. You did this on your own. There's a real danger here. So if everybody believed that God did not call Moses and Aaron, then that's questioning God for one thing. And the other thing is it's questioning, well, if God didn't call you and you say you received all this from God, you didn't. Basically, that would be rejecting God and the Torah. And where would Israel be without God and the Torah? Well, they'd be back in Egypt. They would have disappeared from the face of the earth as a people, and God would have chosen somebody else to bring forth his word and have a chosen people. So it wouldn't be very good, and God just was not going to allow that to take place. And so I'm going to take a look at number 16, 28 through 33. I got a pretty good bit of scripture today. And so, yeah, Moses is going to respond to him. He's told him, we're going to figure this out. Moshe said, here's how you will know that Adonai has sent me to do all these things and that I haven't done them out of my own ambition. If these men die a natural death like other people, only sharing the fate common to all humanity, then Adonai has not sent me. I think if I were Korach about this point, I'd be getting a little nervous. But if Adonai does something new, if the ground opens up and swallows them with everything they own and they go alive down to Sheol, then you will understand that these men have had contempt for Adonai. The moment he finished speaking, the ground under them split apart. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them. And I put the Hebrew up here, and I'm going to get back to that later. Up with their households and all the people who had sided with Korach and everything they owned. So they and everything they owned went down alive into Sheol. The earth closed over them, and their existence in the community ceased. Now, I know Tracy knows the answer to this, and Troy knows the answer to this, and I think there are probably going to be some others in here. I know that Matt and Kim know the answer to this. Was all of Korach's family destroyed? The answer is no. There's a musical group. What's his name? Sons of Korah. Well, where did they get that name? Because in the Psalms, you have some of the Psalms who are written by descendants of Korah. This gets to be important a little bit later in the message also. In other words, they didn't all stand with Daddy. They said, hey, Pops, we love you, but you're not right on this. We can't stand with you on this. Oh, that's hard. That's hard. Okay, so Moses ended up accusing Korah. You want the priesthood for yourself. Now, the very interesting thing about this, Korach doesn't say that. Now, it may be that Moses, and he whined to God, don't accept from this. He didn't like this too much, didn't handle it too well. So maybe he drew this conclusion, or maybe he knew something that is not actually recorded in Scripture. And he told him, he said, look, God has separated you for himself. You get to carry all of the holy articles out of the Holy of Holies. He has drawn you near to him. You have this designation. What's the matter for you? What is the deal that you can't accept this? And Korach, well, I'll tell you what, let's look a little bit deeper into their backgrounds to find out exactly what's going on. I have a chart here. We'll go back to the answer on this. I hope I have the chart. No, I did make a chart, but I made a list. Okay. So here we have the sons of Levy. And the oldest son was Gershon. His sons were Livni and Shimi. And then the next son was Kahat. His sons were Amram and Yitzhar. And Amram fathered Aharon, Miriam, and Moshe, and Yitzhar fathered Korach. So Korach and Moshe were first cousins. All right. So in all of this, you got a big family squabble that's going on. So Korach, son of Kahat, all the Kohathites were the ones who were going to carry the holy articles from the Holy of Holies. And something happens along with that. Numbers 4, 4, and 5. So we're going to go back to the beginning of Numbers. Here's how the descendants of Kahat are to serve in the tent of meeting and deal with the especially holy things. When the time comes to break camp, Aharon is to go in with his sons, take down the curtain, which serves as a screen and a cover for the Ark of the Testimony in it. So Aaron and his sons have this big responsibility. And Korach, so the descendants of Kahat, they can't do their job until Aaron and his sons are to do it. So this is a big responsibility on both their parts. Okay? Now, it's a great honor of what they've been given, but the tragedy is going to come in. Take a look at Numbers 4, 19 through 20. Aharon and his sons are to go in, and you are to assign each one his task. But the descendants of Kahat are not to go in and look at the holy things as they are being covered. If they do, they will die. So we've got this great honor. We get to carry the stuff from the Holy of Holies that only the high priest can go in there. And we get to carry that stuff. Well, the thing is, Aaron and his sons told all the descendants of Kahat, this is what you are to carry. Stand over here. You take this, you take this. Well, now, wait a minute. It's starting to sound like the clan of Kahat's getting bossed around just a little bit. What do you mean Aaron's going to tell me what I can carry? What do you mean Aaron's going to tell me where to stand? What do you mean Aaron's going to tell me when it's time for me to leave? Yeah, exactly. What do you mean I get to carry the holy things, but I don't get to look at them? Why is it that I can carry them, but I can't look at them? It kind of sounds a little bit like Antifa. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to decide what I want to do, how I want to do it, when I want to do it, where I want to do it. And rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft. And so Korach and his family ends up getting punished. The earth opens up and swallows them alive. How many times has this happened before? Yeah, it's not happened before. Not even to Pharaoh and not even to the cruel taskmasters in Egypt. That didn't happen to them. So why suddenly is this going to happen to Korach and to his family? You don't get it in the English, but the Hebrew is going to give you just a little bit of understanding. I want to take a look back at Numbers 4:20 and Numbers 16:32 at the same time. The descendants of Kohath are not to go in and look at the holy things as they are being covered. Bavlah, being covered. If they do, they will die. Now this is 16:32. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them. Bivlah. What do you notice? What's the same word? So when they would go in and cover this, now these were not just holy things. These were especially holy things. Go in and cover them up. The word there is that they got swallowed in this cloth. And that swallowing was for the preservation of the holy things and the preservation of the lives of everybody around there. And so here's Korach. The whole community is holy. Everybody's holy. God is in the midst of all of us. There ain't nothing special about you. You know what's really odd about this? Korach is saying, you have raised yourself above everybody else. Well, what has he done? He's done the exact same thing. I'm better than you, and I'm better than everybody else around here. Yeah, he didn't. He was trying to tear down leadership. But the thing, when people try to tear down leadership, what is their aim? Most of the time, well, it's because I want to be the leader. So Korach considered himself to be like the articles in the Holy of Holies. Yeah, everybody's holy, but I know best, so I'm especially holy. So what happened to him is kind of like God was saying, all right, so you want to think of yourself as being like really holy, like the articles in the Holy of Holies, and they get swallowed up and covered up? Yeah, you're gonna get swallowed up too. So the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them for the same reason that the articles inside the Holy of Holies are covered up, is to preserve life. And because rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft, God just wasn't going to allow Korach and his group to continue what they were doing. And so they had to be covered up. They had to be swallowed up just the same. And that is so that it will avoid causing death in other people. Because rebellion catches on pretty quickly. It can happen really quickly. Well, I want to talk about another rebellion that began to take place. I want to talk about a man with a different spirit. Now, usually when you hear he has a different spirit, who's the first person who comes to mind? Anybody? How about Caleb? Caleb was allowed to go in the land because he had a different spirit. But I want to talk about a different one, and that's Jonathan. Okay? So years later, they're in the land. Saul becomes king, and Saul is doing all right until it gets back to what Samuel said. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Saul rebelled against what the prophet had told him to do. Saul had gotten word directly from God, and he told him, this is what you're to do. And Saul said, I'm going to do what I want to do, the way I want to do it, when I want to do it, and that's how it's going to be. And you know, because of that, Saul ended up getting rejected from the kingship. Okay? So I want to start this part with Matthew 5:48. Behold, just as your Father who is in heaven is whole. Oh, behold, just as your Father in heaven is whole. So if somebody were to come to the door and knock on it and say, hey, how many of you are whole just as your Father is whole? How many of us could raise our hands? I'm keeping my hand down. I ain't there yet. But should we be working toward that end? And the answer is, of course we should. But being whole requires actions that are whole and righteous. And so it's the process of the transformation of becoming more and more like the image of Yeshua. And a great example of that came along before Yeshua, and that's Jonathan. So I want to take a look at 1 Samuel 18:1. This is right after David had killed Goliath. You remember David came along. He wasn't supposed to be out there. He just took food to his brothers. And he said, who is this uncircumcised fool out there who thinks that he can take on the God of Israel? Well, the battle was over by then. So David killed him, cut off his head and everything else. And everybody was saying, Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his hundreds of thousands. And Saul was kind of like, I don't like this too much. Let's take a look. And it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul right after he had killed Goliath. Now, this is really quite remarkable because he heard what David said. David was humble, and David was willing to serve God whatever it took. Okay? So Saul grew jealous of him, and this jealousy drove him mad, and he ended up wanting David dead. He said, I want y'all to kill David. But in the process of this, because Jonathan loved David so much, something actually happened to Jonathan. His soul was knit with David. Does anybody know what the word knit is? In Hebrew, it's kesher. Kesher. Yeah, they keshered. And when you kesher, that is a bond that just does not get broken no matter what. And it's one that's eternal. So the rabbis say that this was absolutely a perfect love. There couldn't be any love better than this. That one man preferred another over himself. Well, that sounds exactly like Yeshua. So David, of course, is the lineage of Messiah, and Jonathan represents us, everybody else who loves the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Jonathan tied his future with David, and thus his name got changed. And I want to take a look at 1 Samuel 19:1. Now, you don't get this in the English, but you do get it in Hebrew. Saul urged his son Jonathan, and all his courtiers to kill David. But Saul's son Jonathan loved David. What's the difference in these two? You have a letter that's added. Take a look. You have the hey added. Okay? Hey. Well, that, every letter in Hebrew has a numerical number, and 8 is the numerical number for the letter hey, and the letter 8 represents eternity. So this is something eternal that's going on here. And his name was changed from Yonatan to Yehonatan. The hey was added to it. Now, why would this happen? It's because God saw what Jonathan did, and in Scripture, his name got changed. This was no slip of the pen. This was no accident. And notice what the first two letters end up spelling. That's Yah. You can use the name Yah in poetry and in song. That's the name of God. So Jonathan, because he tied himself to David, something changed so much within him that God said, now you're beginning to get my character. And he took that on. And so this was very significant. The thing about the letter hey here, if you take away the small part there, does anybody know what letter that is? It's the Dalet. Yeah, it's the Dalet. And that one right there, if you move it up here, it's the Yod. And the rabbis teach that that is the great one who is overlooking the one who is humble. That's a picture of God overlooking his people. And so this is what happened. The letter hey represents the word hashgachah. Hashgachah is the one who watches over the humble. And so he loved David more than he loved his own soul, and he was willing to risk his life even to the point. Because what was Jonathan supposed to get? When Daddy was gone, Jonathan was supposed to get the kingdom. He was so concerned about doing what was right and righteous, he was even willing to risk his own life and to give up his claim on the kingdom because he knew that God was going to choose David to end up replacing his father. So he still called Saul's son Jonathan. And he's got a different character to him now. But is he perfect? because he's still the son of a wicked man. And those are things, as long as we are here in this fleshly body, we're going to be that work in progress that I'd mentioned earlier. Be whole as your Father is whole. It's the work in progress that we have to keep working toward. So Jonathan was not defined by his father, but he was still his father's son. And I'm going to skip that part. So we want to kesher. We want to kesher with Messiah. Okay? And people are calling, oh, I just can't wait to see Yeshua come back. Are we willing to risk what we call our own little kingdoms? Are we willing to risk our lives as Jonathan did for the sake of the one who was and is to come? It requires taking risks. This keshering with Messiah requires taking risks. And we have to give up claims over our own lives. So we can't be like Korach, which I will tell you I struggle with. I have the tendency of Korach within me. When I see things going on coming out of Washington, D.C., I have something rise up in me, and most of the time I have to say, shh. Sometimes I forget to. Sometimes I say things I shouldn't, and I got to give that up. I'm not saying we shouldn't vote. We should vote because it's a responsibility. But I have to watch my mouth, and I have to watch what's in my heart. Well, so the question is, how do we get to be more like Jonathan and less like Korach? How do we take on that character and kesher more with God? Well, we remember our calling, and we know that not only do we have to kesher with God, we have to kesher with each other. We really have to be that tight-knit together with each other. I'm going to take a little bazoo from my message here for just a moment. In Matthew, I think it's 18. I'd have to go back and look. In Matthew 18, this was not long after they had seen Yeshua on the Mount of Transfiguration. When James and Peter and John saw him, it's like, whoa. This was near Sukkot time. Okay, and they had seen miracles and other things taking place. And right after that, they had come to the village of Capharnaum, the city of comfort. And you know what they did? I'm going to be the greatest of all the disciples. Yeah, when Yeshua's gone, I'm going to be the one everybody knows about. I'm going to be the greatest. My reputation is going to be that and everything else. And Yeshua said, what are you arguing about? Nothing. And Yeshua took a little child and pulled him aside and said, you want to be great in the kingdom? Be like this. Be like this. So, okay, back to what I was saying. Paul wrote a letter to the Philippians. And the believers in Philippi had some big problems. Some of them thought they were really strutting with barbecue. We're somebody cool. We know what's going on. We got it all together. They had wrong thinking. They had wrong actions. And it sounds very familiar because in America we have wrong thinking and wrong actions, especially in the body of Messiah. And he ended up giving great advice how to make the transformation into somebody who was more righteous and more in the image of Yeshua. And I want to take a look at chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. And this is my prayer, that your love may more and more overflow in fullness of knowledge and depth of discernment, so that you will be able to determine what is best and thus be pure and without blame for the day of the Messiah. Every time I read that, I think, I ain't there yet. Filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Yeshua the Messiah to the glory of the praise of God. Well, that's one side of the tablets. That's love the Lord your God. Okay? That's the start, loving God. So The other side of the tablets, of course, is love others as you love yourselves. Chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. Do everything without kvetching. What's kvetching? Do everything without and that's another thing I gotta work on. Do everything without kvetching or arguing, so that you may be blameless and pure children of God, without defect in the midst of a twisted and perverted generation. There's the other side of the tablets. Relationship with God and a relationship with each other. Korach broke both of these sides of the tablet. He didn't love God. Or if he did, he didn't love him the way he should. And he surely didn't love Moses. It looked like he loved himself more than anybody else. And thus, swallowed it by the earth. So the message in all of this is keep the peace. Keep the peace. That's what our calling is. And that's what Yeshua demands of us. And when we do that, that's a great way for us to lift up Yeshua, because he said, if I'm lifted up, I'm going to draw all men unto myself. And so as we celebrate the 4th of July this week and our independence, let's remember that we are dependent upon the one who loves us, made us in his image, and one who called us to be like Messiah Yeshua. Shabbat Shalom. Okay.